Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this captured cabochon beaded Kumihimo bracelet with embellishments on the edges. So this is what mine looks like. So what we actually have here is two separate beaded Kumihimo braids where we incorporate SuperDuos into them while we make them, and then we use them afterwards to attach them together first of all, but then also here in the middle to actually capture the cabochon by using beads after we make the braids as well. And equally also with the embellishment on the side there is after we make the braids themselves. So this is what the bracelet looks like. And on the wrist it can look a little something like this. So as you can see it's quite a statement piece of jewellery, but also it really depends on what materials that you choose to put together. So then the back of the piece looks like this. So you can see it's pretty much the same as the front. The only thing that really makes this the back is because it's a flat side of the cabochon, whereas the front has the domed side that looks like that. And then as for the size of this piece, the beaded part of the braids is about 6.5 inches long. And then obviously you can add whatever clasp you want to. So I've got the ribbon ends there and then my extended chain and my lofter claw clasp. But different clasps will add different lengths to it. So obviously that's completely up to what you prefer. But if you want to change the length of the braids themselves, you can do that by either taking some beads off to make it shorter or adding some beads to make it longer in the same pattern that we make the rest of the braids with. Now just be aware for this, because obviously we have this midsection and we want the same length on either end of that, you need to take beads off or add beads on both ends equally. So that means if you want to add some beads to make it longer, you need to make sure you add the same amount on either end, and the same for taking them off. But obviously continuing the pattern that's already there, whether that means adding or taking them away. So if you want to learn how to make this bracelet here and capture the cabochon, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that I'm going to be using. What I have first of all is a round Kumihimo disc because the braid structure we're using for this is a round one. And then the cord I'm going to be using for the braids is this 0.4mm s-lon. I'm just using this grey colour just to match with the main beads I'm going to be using for the braid as well, just in case any of it shows through. And then as for the beads, the main beads I'm using for the braid here, these 8 Miyuki seed beads. And these specific ones that I'm using are some matte metallic silver grey colour. So like I said, they match nicely with that cord. And also for the braid, I'm going to be using these SuperDuos. Now the ones I've chosen are just some black ones, just to be nice and neutral. And then the rest of the beads I'm going to be using here, we're going to add in after we make the braids. And the first ones are these 11 Miyuki seed beads. These specific ones are Duracoat galvanized silver. I'm just using this silver colour here and these two beads just to add that metallic finish to the piece as well. And then the other silver beads that I've got are these 15 Miyuki seed beads. So these are the smallest ones. And then the final beads that I'm using are these 4mm bicones. So this specific colour that I'm using is a dark cyan. Obviously you can choose your own colour. But I'm adding these because I also think the bicones here add a lovely sparkle to the piece. And then I'm adding all these extra beads after we make the braids with these beading needles here, and the thread that I'm going to be using is this fire line. So this is nice and strong and durable. And then the cabochon that we need to capture is this oval 3x4cm agate gemstone cabochon, and this is just a nice bright blue colour to make it stand out nicely. And I'm going to finish off the ends of the piece using these ribbon ends here, where I can then attach my findings. So that's my lotto claw clasp, extended chain and my jump rings. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. And then the cords that we need here is 4 lengths of about 1 meter each of our s-lon for the braid. So we need to put the ends together, make sure they're even, because then what I'm going to do is fold them over. So basically put the ends together again, because then we find the midpoint here, and once we find that, I just tie a regular knot just to hold the cords together and know that that's the midpoint. Then I put a piece of scrap wire around that just to help pull it down through the disc. So now all the lengths of cord have turned into 8 working lengths. So I then took all my cords and attached them onto my Kumihimo disc by putting that knot with the wire down through the hole in the center of the disc, and then the wire's coming out towards the back, and that's also where the braid is going to be growing out from. Then I distributed my cords around like this, so I put one length of cord on either side of the dots all the way around, so I end up with pairs opposite each other, just like this. And then we need to start the braid here, so I take my top left cord, release that from that slot, and then bring that down into the slot on the left side of the bottom pair. Then I take the bottom right cord, bring that up and stay on the right side of the top one there. Then I turn my disc a quarter for the next pair. And then again I take my top left one, bring that down, stay on the left side, and then take my bottom right one, bring that up and stay on the right side. Turn my disc again for the next pair, so another quarter, and then you repeat. So basically we just keep doing this until we have about 1 centimeter of braid, because we need that little length to finish off the ends with. And then once you got that, we need to start adding on the beads to all the lengths of cord. So now that I made that little section of braid, you can see it coming out of the back there. So it's just going to be enough to finish off at the end. Then we want to add our beads onto the lengths of cord. So now I've added all my beads here to the lengths of cord, and then this is what the setup looks like. And as you can see, we have SuperDuos and ADOs on most of the cords here, except for these two where we only have the ADOs. Now what I've done as well is I've taken a picture of this setup here, and then I put that onto my website along with the text description as well. So that might be a little bit easier to know exactly how you need to add your beads. So feel free to go there and have a look. I'm going to leave a link in the description box down below to where you can find that. And also what I just want to mention is that this bead setup here is to accommodate for the way that I work with my braid. So I start with my top left one, bring that down, then I take the bottom right one and bring that up. So the same way that I showed you in the beginning there. So if you start with either the top left one or the bottom right one, you can just set up the beads in the same way as here, and then you'll get the same pattern. But if you start opposite to me, so the top right one or the bottom left one, then you're going to need to set up the beads here in a bit of a different way to achieve the same effect in the braid. And that is in a mirrored image to this. So imagine that you have a mirror in front of your disc, and then you want to set up beads in that mirrored image. So that means that the top two cords there, the beads on them would swap places. So it's not the cords themselves, but obviously the positioning of the beads there. The bottom two would also swap with each other, all the beads on one cord over to the other, and then swap over as well. And the sides, then the top one on either side would swap over the middle with each other, the beads, and the bottom one there would also swap over the middle, and then you achieve that mirrored image. And once you've then added on all the beads here, then we need to add them into the braid. So to do that, we basically just need to continue the braid here, but now every time we move a cord, we also need to add in a bead. So I'm just going to continue. My next one that I'm due to take is my top left one here. Just going to release the cord from the disc, and as I'm doing that, I'm also dropping down the first bead. Let it drop all the way into the middle, and then you need to make sure that bead there tucks underneath the cord that's going out to the side in the middle. So if it doesn't fall in by itself, just push it in with your fingers, and then bring the cord down. Then I take the bottom right one, release the cord as I'm releasing one bead and letting that drop down, and you can just tug it in with your finger there, push it in, while you then bring the cord up. So you can see it's the exact same technique and braid structure. We're now just adding in a bead every time that we move a cord, and it's the same thing throughout. Go to the next pair, and then drop a bead down as you're releasing the cord, and just make sure that those beads go underneath the cords that are going out to the side. That's the most important thing, because that way we end up with the beads on the outside of the braid, and that's what we need for this technique here, for this braid. Whereas if you leave the bead on top of the middle here, then what's going to happen is the beads are going to end up inside the braid, which is not what we want for this design. Because obviously we need all the beads to kind of be on the outside and form the pattern, but also those SuperDuos, so we can then use them later on to achieve the effect that we want. So just keep doing this. And it's the same principle as well when you're using the SuperDuos to add into the braid. So that's the next one that I've reached. I've reached my very first SuperDuo, so I just want to show you that a bit up close so you can see how it's going to work. Again, release the cord, let the bead drop down. That's the SuperDuo in this case. And the same principle, push it all the way down. Now what you're going to find is that it's probably naturally going to sit like this, where the hole in the SuperDuo that we have a cord through is going to be in towards the braid, and then we have the other hole that hasn't been used sticking out away from the braid. And that's exactly what we want. That's the only thing I really will say, is kind of try and keep an eye on that just to make sure that the SuperDuos are going to sit like that, because we need that obviously other hole in the SuperDuo to be sticking out away from the braid. Now it will, like I said, most of the time happen naturally, but maybe just double check throughout just to make sure that we obviously end up with all the SuperDuos in that same way. And you can see there they're just sticking out from that braid and ready to be used once we've made the braid. And then otherwise we just continue. You can see making sure we keep those beads underneath the cords in the middle. Just continue like this until you used up all of the beads. So now that I've added all the beads in here, you can see I don't have any more left to add into the braid, then I just want to finish off this end the same way that we started. So I'm just going to make a short section of braid with just using the cord. So basically you just want to continue the braid structure just without adding beads in. And we're just going to need about the same length as we had in the beginning. And once I have that end there, I like to just secure the end of the braid so we can take it off the disc without worrying about the braid coming undone. because of obviously all the work that we've done. So what I like to do is go to the pair that I'm due to use next, and then I take 2 cords, one from either side that are diagonally opposite each other, release them, bring them across the middle, and then I just tie a knot with them and tighten that straight down on the end of the braid. Leave them out to the side. Then I take the other ones from the same pair, again same thing, tie a knot over the middle, and that knot then goes right on top of the previous one. Then I'm going to go to the other pair and do the exact same thing. Take 2 cords diagonally opposite each other, tie a knot, which again goes on top of the previous one, and then we have the last cords left, which I'm releasing, and again tying a knot, and obviously then also automatically the braid is off the disc. But because this is the last cords, I like to just tie a double knot just to secure that last knot in place. Otherwise, if you just do it once, it will probably come undone while we're working with it. So like that, and we can then remove the disc, and then we have the braid ready. And it then looks a little something like this. So as you can see, we have all the ADOs all the way along the braid, creating the main part of the braid there. And then we have the SuperDuos kind of sitting in some different places. So first of all, we have one side where the SuperDuos are just sat in a straight row all the way up in the same row there. But then on the other ones, we have the same row opposite, but on both ends of the braid, but right in the middle of that row, they're kind of been separated out. And this is the part then that's going to capture the cabochon. As you can see there, so we have a row of SuperDuos on either side of the cabochon, so the front and the back, but on obviously one side of it. So that also means we have this braid in place, but we now need to make another one of this. And also what I'm just going to do is just remove the wire from the end, and also just finish off this end. So just add a bit of glue to where the cords are coming out from and cut the excess off. So this braid is ready. And like I said, make another one of these so we can then use both of them to capture the cabochon. So now that I have both of my braids ready here, we can see they're exactly the same as each other. Then we need to start adding in some more beads and also obviously eventually capture the cabochon. And to do that, we then also need to get a thread and our needles ready. So that's what I have here. So I'm using 2 separate needles and 2 separate lengths of threads. Now I'm just using a length of about a wingspan with each of them. And then what I've done is to put a long tail through each of the needles here. And then it's going to be a little bit easier to work with because obviously if it's a long length. On the end, I've then just tied some knots just to have a bit of a stopper. So we're going to use one length here for each of the braids to begin with. So then first of all, I'm just going to start with one of my lengths of thread and needle and then one of my braids because like I said, we need to work with one for each of them. And I'm first of all just going to attach my thread here. So I'm going to one of the ends where I just have the cord in the braid. And I'm literally just going to put my needle through and then pull my thread all the way through with it until that stopper there with a knot on the end. And then I'm just going to go back and forth through the braid here a few times just to help secure it a bit more. So move a bit to the side, go back the other way, and then again, move a bit to the side to go back the other way again. So just until you feel like it's in there nice and securely, and then I'm going to also start working my way up towards where the beads start. So now I have my thread up closer to the beads there, and you can see it's coming out just below where the beads start. Now what I want to make sure to do as well is come out on the side that's correct for where we need to go. So basically we need to start on the inside of the piece, so that means I need to come out on the side of the SuperDuos where it ends up in the middle there, splitting into the 2 rows. So if you're looking at it like this, not the side where it's continuous all the way, but where in the middle it splits to the 2 rows. So you want to make sure you come out on that side and we reach that first SuperDuo on that side, because that's going to be the inside of the piece. So I'm coming out just below that first seed bead in the braid there. So what I'm going to do is just go straight through that, the very bottom one, and then go through the next one as well if you can, just at an angle. Because then that next one, if I go through that, I'm going to be coming out just in front of that first SuperDuo, but with 2 seed beads in the braid in between the SuperDuo and that seed bead I'm coming out from. Because then straight across from it, which is where we want the thread to come out. And just pull it all the way through. So like that, because then what we need to do is add some beads here, because we need to get to that first SuperDuo, but in the outer hole. So we can obviously then start going through all of them. So we just need to add our first beads to kind of cover up the thread there so we can't see it. So we then also need to bring in some more beads. So in this case here, I'm then bringing in the 11-0 seed beads. And then we also need some more of the SuperDuos, because we need to use them as well to connect the 2 braids together when we get to that point. And then first of all, like I said, we need to get from that seed bead in the braid to the first SuperDuo. And for that, I'm just going to use 2 seed beads of the 11/0 and then basically jump to the outer hole in that SuperDuo and just go straight through it. Pull it all the way, because then you'll be able to see that it kind of covers up the thread and bridges that gap just nicely, fits perfectly, and obviously it makes it more part of the pattern. So now we need to get into the pattern for the rest of this half, or this side of it, and that is 1 11/0 and then 1 SuperDuo and then 1 11/0. So basically we end up with the SuperDuo in the middle of the 2 11/0s, and then we'll go from that first SuperDuo straight on to the next one in the outer hole again, and then they're going to slot in and fit just perfectly between the next SuperDuos there. You can see that's in the braid. Then that SuperDuo is going to be sticking out, and we're going to eventually then end up using the other hole in that new one, the loose one, to connect to the other braid. But for now we're just going to keep going on this side. So again, an 11/0, a SuperDuo and an 11/0, and then jump straight through to the next SuperDuo in the braid, and then pull it all the way through, and you can see they're going to fit perfectly like that. And those seed beads just add a little bit of a nice touch as well, because you can choose whichever colors and materials that you want to. I just like that metallic finish to it, just adds it into the piece. But then you just keep working your way up the side until you get to that last SuperDuo just before the rows and split out to the sides. So now I made it all the way up there. You can see the SuperDuos are just sticking out to the side, and I finished just before the row split up in the middle. So what we need to do now is take the other braid and basically do the exact same thing, but in the process also start connecting them together. So first of all, we just want to get the other braid, and then obviously take the other thread and needle, and then we just want to attach this in the exact same way, and then make our way to that first SuperDuo, but making sure it's on the right side. So it's on the side where the row split out again. So we're going to then add on the inside of this braid, because then while we're then adding these beads in, we're going to also then connect them together, the 2 braids. So now reach the point in that other braid where we need to start adding in the extra SuperDuos, but also going between the ones in the braid. So this is where we need to kind of bring them together as we're doing it. So I'm coming out of that very first SuperDuo in the outer hole, and then it's the same principle that we need to add the same beads. So first of all, I want to add 1 11/0, but then instead of adding a new SuperDuo, we need to go through the one that's already on the other side in the equivalent space, so the very first one of the extra ones, and then pull your needle through to then be able to add another 11/0 to be the one on the other side of the SuperDuo. And then we can just go straight through the next SuperDuo in the braid. So I've just laid the braids here kind of like flat next to each other, but you can work with it however you prefer. I'm going through that second SuperDuo then, in that second braid, and just pull it through, just not get caught on everything here. And pull your thread all the way through, and that will then also start to pull the braids together. And obviously the thread on the other one might get a bit loose throughout, but you just keep pulling them tight, and it's not too big of a deal anyway, because we're going to pull them tight when we get to the end of it before we move on. But then you can see that then pulls them together, but that first new SuperDuo that we added in is now connected to both sides. So really that's all you want to do now on this side here. So to go to the next SuperDuo in this braid, add 1 11/0, then go through the extra SuperDuo on the other side. So just always the next one, and then another 11/0, and then go through the next SuperDuo in the braid. Then always in the outer hole that hasn't been used. And then just pull it tight, so pull your thread all the way through without getting tangled up here. Just have a little knot, I think. There we go, and just pull it through. And then we can really start to see it come together. Like that, and again you can pull the other one tight continuously if you want to, or just leave it to the end. But then it really starts to bring them together, almost a bit like a sipper sipping it up. But then just keep working like this on this side until you reach the same place in that very last SuperDuo before the rows split up. So now I've gotten to that same point on both sides there, and we started to connect our braids together. So then what we're just going to do is get both our threads and needles into the right position for the next step. So I'm just going to work with one at a time, doesn't matter which one you start with, and it's coming out from that very last SuperDuo, going away from you. Then what I want to do is start to go through the braid. So I'm going to just go straight down next to that SuperDuo and just come straight through the braid to the other side. I'm not going through any of the beads, it's through the braid. So basically kind of more or less through the cords within the braid. And then just come out on the other side and just pull your thread all the way through. Just make sure we don't get caught up on any knots or anything. I think a little knot that's just been forming there. Just undo that before actually pulling it through. Something like that. And then just go and continue to pull it through. And then what we just need to make sure of as well is, as we're pulling this through, that we don't have any loose thread down where all the beads we added in are. So we want to make sure that it's pulled nice and tight. You don't need to pull it super tight throughout like this now, but just make sure there's no loose thread showing anywhere. And then I'm going to go back through the braid again, and I'm just going to go through it a couple of times here. And again, it's literally just through the braid, not through any of the beads. We want to avoid going through any of the beads, so I've just gone a little bit to the side next to where the thread is actually coming out. And then I go through to the opposite side again, because then when we pull this tight, that thread is going to just nestle in between those beads if we just pull it. So again, make sure you're pulling it, give it a bit of a tug, so if any thread still is down here showing, that will tighten that up as well. And like I said, I'm just going to go through it a couple of times here, but then I'm going to start making my way to the next SuperDuo that we need to get to. And that's one right there in the middle, and I'm going to stay on the side that's kind of facing upwards. We're just going to work on one side at a time. So again, through again. And then you can kind of feel when you're pulling it, it just gives a little click when the thread goes in between the beads. That's when you know that it's hidden away nicely. Then it's going to come through again, and now I'm going to make sure I come out by the SuperDuo that I want to come out by. So, like I said, I'm going to be working. We have these two rows in the middle, and it's on the inside, so we're going to be working with them, but I'm going to just work on one side at a time. So I'm going to work on the top side to begin with. So that means I want my needle to basically come out right in front of that very first SuperDuo of those double rows. And then just pull the thread all the way. Again, now just double check everything, make sure it's tight enough. We are going to be going back through all the beads and that, but obviously making sure throughout is ideal. Because then what I want to do now is we need to get to this first SuperDuo in the outer hole, because that's where we then need to start adding in the next set of beads. So I actually want to go through the hole in that SuperDuo, but the one that's already in the braid, so the inner one. So I'm just going through that first, because we need to get through that outer hole in the opposite direction. So our thread and needle will be coming downwards. So I'm coming out of that, and then I'm going to just go through the same SuperDuo but in the opposite direction in that outer hole now. So the thread now comes downwards basically towards ourselves. And we can just pull the other one and see how it's going to look. And that is basically where we need to get the other thread as well. So just leave this one that we've just done just kind of hanging out there for now. Then we need to go to the other side, take this thread and do all the same things. So just go through it a few times and make sure you then get to the outer hole in that SuperDuo, the equivalent one on that braid there. So now I have both my threads in place, we need to start working on this middle section. So first of all, we kind of just need to connect the two sides again, right on the bottom SuperDuos. So I'm just going to start with one needle, it doesn't matter which one, and then I'm going to bring in some beads. So again, we're using some more SuperDuos. We just need an extra one on the bottom here, and then also an extra one on the top when we get to that point. But then I'm using the 15-0 seed beads, so the really small ones. And then what we're going to add is, like I said, on one needle first of all. Then we need to add 4 seed beads, and then the one SuperDuo, and then another 4 seed beads again. So again, that SuperDuo ends up in the middle of all of these beads. Then I bring them down my thread, something like that. Then I have all those beads there. Then I need to take the other needle that's coming from, in my case, the right side, and go through all these beads, but in the opposite direction. So just make sure you go through and you catch all of them. So all the little seed beads, and then that SuperDuo and the seed beads on the other side of it. Just double check that you caught all of them. Then go through. And then we can grab hold of both of the threads without getting caught up, and then pull it tight. And that's going to then sit right there and connect those two bottom SuperDuos, as you can see. And we have that extra SuperDuo that we added in sitting loose for now. That will be connected later on, but for now we're just going to work on that middle section and connect the SuperDuo when we come back to it and go the other way again. So what I'm then going to do is bring my threads to continue working in the middle area here. So I'm just going to take the thread and needle that's on my right side, go through the SuperDuo as well on that side that we were originally coming out from to add these extra beads, just to get in position. Just again make sure I don't get caught on the ends of the braids here. So like that, make sure I don't get any knots either. That's now through that SuperDuo, and then we do the same on the other side. Also bring that needle through that SuperDuo. So basically the same SuperDuos that we just came out of. Because then we can continue going around almost in a circle to also reach the other end. So there's it nicely there. So now we need to add all the seed beads here on the side. That's going to end up helping to capture the cabochon. So then to start adding the beads, I'm going to again work on just one side at a time. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to add the 15-0s on the sides here only. So what I'm going to do is to go to the next SuperDuo on this side. I'm just going to start on my left side. I want to add 4 of my little seed beads. So the same that we added on one side of the SuperDuo there in the middle. Then jump to the next SuperDuo that's in the braid on that side. Pull it all the way through. And you can see that then bridges that gap. And then basically you want to work your way all the way to the other end of these double rows, but obviously only on this side. And then I'm going to do that, just come back and tell you the amounts of beads that I added between them. So then I made it all the way to the other end there of those double rows, and you can see the next one will be that single row again, just like in the beginning. And then just to tell you how many beads I've added between the gaps of those SuperDuos. So if we don't count the first one here, we'll add in the extra SuperDuo in the middle. Just leave that out, but then go from the next one, which is the first one we only added in seed beads. There I have 4 seed beads in the first gap. In the second gap, I have 4 as well. In the next gap, there's 3, and also in the next one, and the next one after that. So that means the 3 middle gaps have only got 3 seed beads, and the next 2 here have got 4. So that means the 3 middle gaps have got 3 seed beads, and the 2 on either side of them, so the first 2 and the last 2 have got 4. And then it looks like that, because then the effect that we can get is, if I then just show you here, if we grab onto the thread and then we can start to pull this tight, it'll make it curve up like that. And that's obviously exactly what we want for curving around and capturing the cabochon. So that rounded oval shape of the cabochon. It's adding the different amounts of beads between there that makes that happen. But then what we need to do is take the thread and needle on the other side, and then obviously add all the same amount of beads between the gaps here in the exact same way until we reach that top part, because then we also just need to do the middle in the very top end here. So now that I got to the top end there on both sides, then we just need to do that middle part, and that's basically just exactly the same. So I'm just going to grab one needle first of all, and I'm going to add 4 of my seed beads. Then we need to add the single SuperDuo, and then another 4 seed beads to make sure that that SuperDuo is in the middle. So like that. So that's going to be the exact same as we did on the bottom end. And I'm just going to slide them down the thread a bit. So again, we can do the same as well as before and go through these with the other needle in the opposite direction. Again, make sure you catch all of them. Need all the other seed beads here. Go through them like that, and then you can just double check and then start pulling your thread through. So that as we're pulling this, it's going to bring them down to sit and then connect the whole piece right there at the top. And again, we have that single loose SuperDuo that we're going to then use later on. But then if I pull these tighter, you can start to see it really start to curl up. Obviously, it's going to help it when we do the other side, but also put the cabochon in. It's going to get a bit of shape. So kind of bring them out to the side like that. And obviously the cabochon is also going to help force it to sit properly. So then from there, I want to just get my threads and needles into the right position for the next bit, because we've done the middle part here. We're going to go through it again, like I said, also the other end, but we obviously need to get this end done as well because that's still open. So I just want to get my thread and needle also through those SuperDuos in the braid that they were coming out of. So just do one side at a time. So we can then get to the next point and do the other side there with the single rows. So just pull the thread through, making sure I don't get tangled up here, which I have a little bit. So like that, and then pull it through, and then that's going to tighten it up nicely. And then we can also make sure we can use this to pull this part nice and tight, because obviously we need to make sure we get that shape in place, because otherwise there's going to be gaps between some of the seed beads in the sections there between the SuperDuos. So we then need to get the needles and thread, like I said, to that next position. And we do that simply by taking one needle at a time and then doing the step where we go through right next to that SuperDuo that we're coming out of, go through the braid without going through any of the beads to the opposite side there. And then just bring your thread all the way through. Just getting that little knot undone that keeps forming. Like that. So pull it through. Obviously do the same on the other side, and once you've done that as well, we can also really start to make sure we keep pulling this tight as we're going through. And then otherwise just go through this a few times back and forth while continuing to pull it tight, as well as doing the other side as well, so we can get it even. And then get to the point where we need to start working from the next SuperDuo, but in this other side where it's a single row. So basically that's the very last one on the bottom half, the bottom side that we did. So we need to get out right before in front of that next SuperDuo by going through the braid back and forth a few times, while, like I said, making sure to tighten up this middle part. So now I have both of my threads coming out in front of those SuperDuos there, one on each side. Then I just need to take, again, one needle and thread at a time and actually go through the outer hole in that SuperDuo and then pull it all the way. So then that thread again runs along this side of the SuperDuo, and you won't really be able to see it, especially if you're using a thread that blends in nicely. While you're at it, you can just do the other side as well. I'll also go through the outer hole in that SuperDuo, because then we're in position for both sides to, on this end, be connected together. Just undo another knot here. Always rather, if you discover a knot or tangling, undo it before you keep pulling on it, because if you just pull on it, it'll kind of just tighten up the knot more and make it sometimes very difficult, or maybe even impossible to get undone. But then I have both of my threads through those first SuperDuos there. And then it's the same exact principle as the first side that we did down there. I'm just going to do one side at a time, and we're then going to add, I've now gone back to the 11 seed beads here. We need to add one seed bead, one SuperDuo, and one seed bead. So these are the larger seed beads of the extra ones that we're adding in. and then I'm going to jump to the next one, so fill in that gap between the SuperDuos in the braid, and then add another seed bead, SuperDuo and seed bead. So I'm using the larger ones here because if we use the small seed beads, the very smallest ones, for the sides, they're not quite large enough, you'd get bigger gaps, or you could obviously use more. So this is just what I've chosen to use, whereas the smaller ones are in the middle because we have more control over how many we add. And then you always want to keep until the end, but then the other side, you just do the same principle of adding one seed bead, but then the SuperDuo is the one that we already added in. So go through that one to then add in another seed bead. Let that drop down. And then you can just pull your thread through. Getting a little bit tangled again. This one here is really teasing. Like that. Pull that through so we can then take this same needle and go through the next SuperDuo that's in the braid. So you can see the exact same principle as we did on the other end as well. So we're basically zipping up this side now, and just do that until you've reached the end of them, so you used up all the seed beads there. Once you've then done that, what we want to do is get a thread and needle to the end where we have the cord in the braid. So you just want to go through from the very last SuperDuo, same on both sides, add another 2 of the seed beads. They're going to fit in that gap nicely to go through those 2 last beads that are incorporated into the braid. So these 2 here go through the one that's straight across from the SuperDuo till we get down to this end, and then I recommend going through that a few times. Now you can either finish off your thread if you feel like you haven't got that much left, if you don't really like working with long threads, then rather kind of then finish it off there and cut off the excess and then start a new one rather than try and squeeze it if you feel like you maybe don't have enough, because you can easily do that, or just continue if you feel like you do have enough. So then what we need to start doing now is moving our threads back up again, and we need to follow the thread paths that we already have. So again, just one at a time. I'm coming out just at the end of the braid there with just a cord, but before the first bead. So I just want to go through that same path that we've already done. So the ones in the braid, and then also I'm going through those extra ones that are just covering up the thread. And then we just need to start coming down through this side again. So just work with the one needle and thread at a time, and we're literally just going to follow that same path of through the SuperDuo in the braid, through the next seed bead, then through the extra SuperDuo and the next seed bead, and so on, and just literally go through as many as you can at a time. If you know to do a few, then do that, and then you just pick it back up again and go through the next bunch that you can get your needle through, making sure obviously to not miss any. This is also going to help reinforce it, the side, because obviously we're going through it several times rather than just the one, which wouldn't really be enough. It adds a bit of strength and rigidity in there as well. So like that. So get all the way down to that very last SuperDuo on the side here, and then repeat with the other side as well until we have both threads coming out from either of those 2 SuperDuos. So now that I have my thread coming out from those 2 SuperDuos there on the end, then we need to connect our threads from those SuperDuos to this loose SuperDuo still we have in the middle on this end of the mid part. And to do that, again, just use one needle at a time. I'm adding 3 of my 11-0 seed beads, just going from one side there, and then going through. I'm taking my right thread, so I'm going through from the right side of the outer hole that hasn't been used yet in that SuperDuo, pulling it all the way through, and then we take the needle from the opposite side, again add 3 of your 11-0s, and then also bring that through the same hole in that SuperDuo but in the opposite direction. So I'm taking the left thread, going through from left to right, and then pull that all the way through as well. And then that's going to create that nice connection point and kind of make it blend in with the pattern. And also obviously use up the other hole in this SuperDuo. So what I'm then going to do is, using one needle at a time, we need to get from that hole in that SuperDuo to the other one. So I'm just going to go along the side of it and then through the other hole. Now what you can do is, if you can, go through the seed beads on that side as well, and make sure you catch all of them. You can see I have my thread, my needle there, coming through the other hole in that SuperDuo and through those seed beads. It also then happens to be able to go through that next SuperDuo in the braid. But literally just take as many beads as you can, as your needle really will allow you to go through. So just bring that through. You can just do the same with the other one. So again, the thread now comes up the opposite side of this SuperDuo. And then while I'm at it, I might as well just try and go through a few of the beads. If you can't go through any, you can also just go through the SuperDuo and then just do them separately after. You can see there my needle is coming out just before the SuperDuo in the braid. So whatever your needle really dictates, just follow that and then pick it back up. So like that. And then also just make sure to pull this nice and tight, so we don't have any loose thread showing anywhere at all. So all we're going to do now is basically follow the thread path in the middle that we've already done. So I want to go through along both sides there, back down to the bottom, where we also have that loose SuperDuo. So that also reinforces this whole midsection. And you can also take the opportunity to, once you get down, and help tighten it up even more. So if you still have a bit of thread showing where the beads aren't pulled as tight as it could be, you can take the opportunity now and make sure to do that as we're going through it again. But otherwise, on this end, when you get down here, repeat everything but in reverse order. So we need to get to the outer hole in this SuperDuo, and then we can add in the extra seed beads again, just like we did here, those 3, and then go to those 2 SuperDuos in the braid, the first ones there, first one on either side, and then make our way all the way down through this side again as well, obviously with each needle one at a time, and then go to this end and then just reach the end with just the cord again. And then we've gone through a few times back and forth, and we've also captured in the last loose SuperDuos there. So now reach down to this end here, then we can see the thread is coming out from those last beads in the braid. So what we want to do now is just go through the ends of the braid just like we've done before. And that's also a chance you want to make sure when you're going through that you pull the thread nice and tight, so that this whole section where the thread is coming through, and it tightens up anything else up here so we don't have any loose thread. But then this is also the chance on this end where if you need to, you can always add in a new thread by finishing this one off first. Obviously if you have enough left, you can also just keep using the same. But then once we've gone through here, what we need to do is come back up the same thread path again. But then we actually need to flip this over and get to the other side, because we still have these SuperDuos in the middle that we need to use as well to capture the cabochon. So as we're coming up, we're going to then go through the braid, just like I showed you before, through those last SuperDuos on the sides, and then make our way to the first ones in the middle there, because then we need to start capturing this side of the middle part. So now that I reached those 2 SuperDuos there, the one on each side with both threads, and I'm coming out downwards towards me with the threads and needles, this is then when we need to cross through those beads that we also did on the other side. So we take 4 15-ohs and then 1 SuperDuo and then 4 15-ohs again, and then go through the other thread and needle in the opposite direction, and then we can pull it tight there in the middle, and it's going to just sit perfect. Then we have the extra SuperDuo that we're going to then connect later on. But first of all, we then need to start going up through the sides here as well. Just obviously this is a section we're going to actually capture the cabochon with, just like the other side. So I'm just going to work with 1 thread at a time on one side there, and then swap over to the other side. So I'm just going to be adding 4 15-ohs between each of these SuperDuos all the way up to the top. Once I've reached that with both sides, then we can cross through the same beads there that we just did on the bottom on that top side as well. And then obviously what we're going to need to do is then actually capture the cabochon. So now cross through those beads at the top there as well. You can see we have all the beads on the sides. So this is going to be the front of the piece. So that means now I can add my cabochon in. So we just put it into the space, and you just want to make sure to kind of push it down. So that also spreads out the braids a little bit and just makes the shape obviously more appropriate to the cabochon. And then basically what we need to do now is capture this in so it's going to stay. Now this can be a little bit fiddly because you can see as you kind of pull this tight, we first of all need to make sure it stays tight, but the cabochon can move around a little bit and maybe pop out a few times while you do it. So just keep kind of pushing it into place while you're tightening this. Now what I'm going to see about doing is, again, before it gets tightened completely, I'm going to go around back through those SuperDuos there, just using one at a time, go around all these beads along the edge of the cabochon one more time till I get to the top again. Same with the other one, the other way, because then when we pull it tight, that's going to help hold it better in place before we then need to move on to go back out through the braid just like we've done before to get to this other side, to be able to go through all these beads to get to the end. So that's just what I'm going to do, can help hold it tighter and obviously make sure the cabochon stays in there. So basically you just do that. And obviously make sure it's nice and tight in there because this is the point now where we're capturing it. Once you then get to the end after having done that, come back up again, because then what we need to do is just attach these other holes in those extra SuperDuos that we added in. And again, that's the exact same way as I did it on the other side. So just go through all that, do that, make sure the cabochon's in there nice and tight. And then we come down to one of the ends. And then all that's really left to do is all these SuperDuos here on the edge, they also need to be filled in with the gaps between them. So now I've captured the cabochon securely in there, and I've reached with both of my threads down to one of the ends. It doesn't matter which end. What I also recommend that you do is, if you have enough thread, ideally go around these areas several times. So go through all these beads that capture it several times to help tighten it more and more if you need to. And also again, you can easily flip it to the back and also tighten that even more if you need to as well, just to make sure it's really in there and it's going to last nicely. So then what we have left to do is, where the threads are in position to start adding the embellishments on the edges. So to do that, we're going to need to get our beads ready here. So first of all, we need the 11 O's back in. Then I need my bicones as well. These are going to be really the main embellishment on the edge. And then we also need the 15 O's again, so the little tiny ones, because we're going to be using a combination of all of them in different parts of it, just so it fits nicely. And then I'm just going to be working on one side at a time, so with one needle here. Then I'm coming out from that bead again, that's right opposite the SuperDuo in the braid, the very first one, just as we did on the inside, and I'm going to start the exact same way. We need to add 2 of the 11 O's. I'm going to start using them first of all. Then I'm going to go through the outer hole in that first SuperDuo, and it's going to just bridge that gap nicely. Then we need to start adding in the bicones as well. So what I'm going to be doing on this side is I'm going to add 1 11 O and then 1 bicone, and then jump to the next SuperDuo, and then from there 1 11 O and 1 bicone, if I can get it on there. There we go, and then jump to the next SuperDuo. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I've done this side, so until I basically reach that little corner before we start on this side of the cabochon. And that then looks like this. So you can see the bicone stitches nasty on the edge there on the side of the piece. So now when I'm getting to the middle where it's on the side of the cabochon, I'm going to switch to the 15 O seed bead. So first of all, we just need to get to the outer side of it, because right here obviously we won't be able to fit a bicone. So on there, in that little corner, I'm just going to add 2 of the 15 O's and then go through the next SuperDuo. They're just going to slot in there. Again, just bridging the gap and kind of covering that thread. And then on the outer edge of the cabochon there, I'm going to add 1 15 O, 1 bicone, and 1 15 O, and then jump to the next SuperDuo. And that's going to fit perfectly there. So basically, the bicone is in the middle with a seed bead on either side of it, just kind of framing it in nicely. And the sizing fits perfectly with these beads between the gaps of the SuperDuos. And again, just keep doing this until you reach the other side, the top part there of the cabochon. So again, we get to that little corner where we need to add in the little beads again, just to bridge the gap. So in total there, I've used 7 bicones on the side of the cabochon, so on this curved part of the braid. Now we get to that upper corner, you could call it. So there again, same as before, we need to add 2 of the 15 O's, because it's the smallest little gap that we have. And then now we reach the other side, so this is going to be the same as the bottom part, except in reverse. So instead of adding an 11/0 and a bicone, I'm going to add a bicone and an 11/0 just to kind of get it mirrored so it becomes nice and even and symmetrical. Then add that in, and then again just repeat this between each SuperDuo all the way to the end. And then here we also then just after the last SuperDuo use the 2 11/0s to again cover the thread and go through those beads in the braid. And then once you've done that, obviously you want to do the same on the other side. It's just mirrored on the other side there, but otherwise you're following the exact same pattern and it's going to fit perfectly. And then what I recommend doing as well, if you have extra thread, go through these outer beads a couple of times. So go up, go through the end of the braid and then come back down again just to kind of help reinforce it. But then otherwise, once you've finished off the edge, all we have to do is finish off the thread itself, but then also finish off the ends of the braid. So once I'm done with the thread completely, then to finish it off, I just got to one of the ends there, and then I've gone through a few times, and then I want to start tying some knots so I can actually cut off the excess of the thread. So I'm going to go through again, but instead of pulling the thread through the whole way this time, just going to pull it through, but leave a little loop, so make sure I have that there. Then I'm going to take my needle and go through that loop twice, and then pull all the thread and the needle through it. And now I grab hold of the thread and needle and then just pull it tight. And then that tightens up the thread there and it creates that little knot that we need. Then I'm going to go straight through again the braid, just completely now, pull it all the way. Then I'm going to do another knot. So I'm just making a knot going through the braid, and then I'm going to make another knot. Again, leave a little loop, go through that twice, and then pull it tight, and that creates another knot, and then go through the braid again. Now just do a few of these until obviously the thread is nice and secure. Once you've done your last knot though, make sure you do go through the braid at least once or twice before you cut off the excess of the thread, otherwise that last knot will come undone. So now I'm going to go back and forth a few times and then just cut off the excess, and then once you've done that with both of the threads, then we have these little ends of the braid left, and that's when I'm then going to use these ribbon ends to add glue into and put them onto the end and clamp them down, because then we have these little loops in them where we can attach our findings to. Obviously do that on both of the ends. It's going to finish them off nicely and securely, and also you can then add really whatever clasp that you want to. So that's how you finish off the ends. So do that, add your clasp, and then you're going to have your finished bracelet. So now that I've finished off both of the ends, this is what my bracelet looks like. So I have my ribbon ends there on the end, and I've attached my lotto claw clasp to this one, and then just my extended chain on the other end. Obviously you can attach whatever kind of clasp that you want to. And this is what the front of the bracelet looks like. So this is obviously the front because it's the domed part of the cabochon, and then the back looks like this because it's a flat side. So they're pretty much the same look to them, but obviously the back is because it's nice and flat, and you get that more rounded look on the front. And it's also nice and comfortable to wear because there isn't any bulk really on the back of the braid here. So that's how you make this. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please feel free to check out other tutorials on my channel. I have loads, and I also have other tutorials where I capture cabochons using Kumihimo. So feel free to check them out. You might find that interesting if you like this one. But thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.